Less than 30 seconds now in regulation. Could this take extra time? 16 seconds. Here's Dial. Send it up the point, J. Lalu. Tall midget now, but Matt, 6 seconds, 5, Dalfan coming out. He gets around him, 2 seconds. He's got to do it quick. Shoot, the scores, 1 second left.
And we are live. Well, kind of live anyway. Pre-recorded show. So, but we're here. Second episode ever of the. I still haven't come up with a good name for it, so we're just calling it the Faceoff interview
It's
series.
not officially the Faceoff?
It is not. No, I'm sort of leaving that because I feel like I can't do the Faceoff without Dick Doug, and Dick Doug is no longer with our community. So,
oh man,
yeah, he's retired. He's off to bigger and better things now, like prom apparently. So,
well, good for him. Good for
yeah,
him.
I hope he had fun at that. But yeah, so he's no longer with us. So I feel hesitant to really call it the Face Off. So I'm doing it as kind of a spin off of the Face Off anyway, and it's really not focused on like the current leagues or anything, but purely just each episode is about one person in the community, their experience in the community, their background, really just an extended interview. And for this episode, episode 2, we're here with Winters.
Hello, it's good to be here, man. I know that you've got a whole list of veterans who are lining up to be on this thing, and so, I mean, as somebody who mostly just watches the games rather than plays the games, I feel like it's kind of an honor to be among that kind of company. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're one of the first people I thought of when I wanted to do this, and definitely very interested in seeing your insight into a lot of this, as you're somebody who, like you said, really watches instead of plays. So you come into this with a very different perspective, a very different background than most of us who are playing, and I think that's fascinating to look at, how you approach things, how you approach the community and the game versus how somebody who plays it every day sort of thinks about it. So I'm
Cool.
definitely looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so happy to kick it off. So yeah,
Yeah, man.
we're here with Winters, who, for those of you who might not be aware a little bit about him, he is the program director of IBN Casting. He's the technically co-founder and community manager and sound engineer at Hella Legit Games. A lot of responsibilities there. You've been shoutcasting video games for going on 6 years now. You've casted a multitude of games in varying genres, and that includes games like Hockey, Tribes Ascend, Super Bowl, Warframe, World of Tanks, and probably more too. As far as HQM goes, you've been here casting HQM for 4 years now. Can you believe that?
Wow, man.
4
Yeah, that's
years.
crazy.
Most people don't know this, but you actually did play at one point in time. You played in season 1 of the HQML for a team called Blood Dragon.
Yes,
And
terribly, but by God, we got out there and played. Yeah.
well, you played well enough to get the championship trophy named after you, the Blood Dragon Memorial Trophy, right? So
Yeah,
that's
out
something.
of sympathy, but yes, it's a win's a win, right? Yeah.
You've been involved in streaming and casting LHL games over the past 13 seasons, and usually you'll do one game day or one game night a week, and
Yes.
we do usually 3 game nights a week, so that amounts to about 24 LHL games a season, which is over 300 games since the LHL has started. And if you assume 20 minutes for every game or an hour for every night, however you want to look at it, that's over 100 hours of completely volunteer casting work for HQM, and that's actually specifically just the LHL alone. That's not including all the hours of show matches and international matches you've casted, and the
Oh yeah,
HQML and
Friday Night
62A
Hockey.
League,
Yeah,
and
there's many hours of tacked onto that. Yeah.
all done as volunteer work, which is something that I think is really incredible and shouldn't go without appreciation. So I just wanted to thank you for everything that you do, that you have done, and that you will do in the future.
Oh man, it's been a blast. I'm a big fan of the game, and I'm just thrilled with how the community's grown over the years, and just to kind of watch the game evolve.
I'm sure it's been quite the journey for you because you've been around longer than just about anybody who's left playing. So you've really seen it from its inception. And that's something that we'll touch on in a little bit. But I want to actually start out by asking you some more personal questions about your career and
Hmm.
shoutcasting. And my first one is just you as a gamer. How long have you been gaming and what game first got you into it?
Oh, well, I'm fairly old, so without going into that too much about that, we kind of grew up with games our whole lives, so I just never quit playing, and so just about whatever's been going on over the years, I've managed to find my way into it, and many different kinds of games, but especially things like shooters and sports games. And of course, hockey is definitely one of those sports games that caught my eye over the years.
Okay, so you mentioned shooters and sports games are your favorite. What would you say is your favorite game of all time? Could be going as far back as in your childhood or during high school or during after high school, maybe in college or whatever the case was.
It would probably be Return to Castle Wolfenstein back in '01 or so, and that was when I first got into eSports and got on a team, played a little bit of what the pro scene was at that time anyway, and uh, competitive esport type of stuff, and just the game itself was so much fun that much like it is in the hockey community, you end up practicing a whole lot with your team, and then after that, after everybody's done, you go and just play pubs for fun, even though you've already put in hours and hours into the game. So it had that kind of appeal to me. And after that, I really got more into the multiplayer competitive scene, and it's just been going on for years.
So that was your sort of first foray into esports?
Yeah, it would definitely be. Yeah, and our team was together for 3 or 4 years, which is a pretty long time in esports, and we managed to get to the top of a few competitive ladders. And there was one site where they used to keep the recordings of the games. We had the two of the most watched demos on there. One where we were getting completely shit stomped, and one where we were doing the shit stomping. So it was a nice record of our career and our progress.
That's awesome. So you've been in esports now for 15 years, right?
Yeah, at least, yeah,
So you've got
and
to
kind of.
see the growth of not just games like HQM, but the growth of esports in total as it's gone over the past, like we said, 15 years, right? Ever since the days of Quake and StarCraft early on, all the way up to now where you've got the MOBAs coming in big. You've got things like Counter-Strike. Um, you've got even people are watching like competitive MMORPGs like WoW, and I don't understand that, but hey, man, it's something. And Overwatch is the new big one, right?
Yeah, it's really been amazing. And see, I was around for the first go round of Counter Strike. Being from Texas, a lot of this stuff kind of came from the Dallas area. Quake was from id Software right out of Mesquite, and it's been kind of the spiritual home of first person shooters for sure, and esports to a large extent, because I remember they used to have those the CPL. They'd have those tournaments for Counter Strike, and like 4 times a year you'd have a big 250 grand competitions over
Those
in
were the
Dallas.
first. Those are the first majors in Counter Strike. Actually, for those of you who play Counter Strike Go now, there are two or three majors a year, and the CPL events were considered the first majors of Counter Strike. So that's actually really cool that that was sort of the time that you got to grow up in and experience versus now, where we're selling out massive arenas in Germany or in New York City or in LA and filling it with thousands and thousands of people that are there to watch live. Like that's got to be such an incredible journey for esports in total.
Oh, for sure. And I know that sometimes it's kind of a sleazy business, though. I mean, I've been doing music and entertainment for most of my life, and some around a lot of that stuff. But yeah, sometimes in esport, there's good and bad about it. I mean,
For
when you
sure.
bring up the CPL now, for example, a lot of people have some kind of bitter memories about some of the where did the money go aspects of that whole thing, but they remember fondly the competition and the players. And what I find is I've always been one of those casters that does quite a few different games. You know, I'm kind of a utility man. You know, sometimes they'll bring me in for stuff, you know, that they don't have other people to do and things like that. I've always been one of those kind of guys. But you see a lot of the same players keep going from game to game, and so there's a lot of really skilled esports guys at the highest level, and you're seeing them switch over now. You know, you're talking about Overwatch. I know
Yeah.
a lot of the guys I knew from Tribes and from Quake and from games like that. You know, Shoot Mania, and you know people I've met. You know, in these other games, they're thriving in Overwatch now. They're hoping for Quake Champions to do well when it comes out, but you start to see a lot of the same faces, and it's a pretty cool thing. I always say esports is really big, but it's really small in that, you know, yeah, it's growing and there's this huge following for it, but there's also, if you're around it, if you work in it enough, you're going to know pretty quickly who the cool people are and who the cool people aren't. And it's a very close knit community in itself. It's kind of odd how that works, but yeah, that's been my experience with it over the years.
The connections are everything, and I mean that's the case for a lot of walks of life, right? But it's really all about who you know. It feels like at this point.
Absolutely, and see some of those guys that I've met in games and played with over the years. They've been people that I made connections with, you know, beyond playing the games. And I think that's, you're going to find that that's true with hockey too. I know you guys have done several meetups in person and things like that. You know,
Yep.
I mean, some of the people that y'all are Snapchatting with and stuff right now, those are going to be people that you're going to be talking to 10 years later. You know, just like, I mean, if Dick Doug's prom goes well and you know he gets married, has a successful life and everything, I'm sure he'll be, you know, still hollering at you. You know, I mean, it's, and that's the real reward of all of this stuff, man. And that's something I've seen really in hockey, despite the occasional flare-ups of drama and stuff. It's, those are the things that people are going to remember about the game as much as they do playing the game.
For sure, man, for sure. I mean, I played WoW for a long time, going back to when I was, I think 15 I started. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
9 years ago. It was pretty shortly before the Burning Crusade expansion came out. But anyway, I made a lot of friends in WoW that I still talk to, 6 or 7 years later. I talk to pretty regularly, and I still play games with every now and then too. So that was really the biggest thing I took away from that, and I'm expecting it'll be pretty similar with the HQM community. It's really more about the community that develops around the game rather than the game itself, and that's something that I think is just really special. So, but anyway,
Yeah, it
well,
brings people together, man. It
for
really
sure, dude,
does.
for sure. So we'll get back on track with you specifically because it's what we're all here for. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about you. So what led you or what kickstarted your career in shoutcasting?
Well, I'd always been a fan of shoutcasting in general, and the reason they call it shoutcasting is because it used to be audio only. Back in the days of Winamp, there was a program called Shoutcast that allowed you to do audio streams. And so, for back in the days that we're talking about, like Return to Castle Wolfenstein and the original Tribes, you'd listen to it like you would listen to a baseball game on the radio, for example. You couldn't see the game because we didn't have even the real audio or whatever would not, you know, stream at that quality. So you'd listen to somebody describe the game to you. So it's I was always a fan of how it was done. But back when Tribes Ascend was in closed beta, I started watching the cast that they were doing with a group called Tribes Cast. A fellow named Craig who ran that was very good, and I expressed an interest in doing some casting myself. Well, of course, they get a million people. Well, I could do this. Let me just.
Yeah.
You need to put me on there. But what I did was what I'd always done. I have a background in radio and FM radio and stuff, and so I did what we used to call a board tape. A demo of myself casting games. I just went in and cast some pubs, and I sent it to them, and they were just like, we've never had anybody take the time to actually send us a sample of themselves casting, which I thought was very surprising, but it did lead to me getting a job there, and I got to do quite a bit with them. They had a very big tournament at the time, the NASL. It was the North American Star League. It was the Korean Star League from StarCraft, moving over to do American stuff. Another one of those eSports companies that was big at one time and maybe forgotten in memory now, but we did all the casts for them when they started doing Tribes Ascend. And through that game and through Tribes Cast, I met so many great casters. And when the Tribes Cast eventually sort of broke up as the game sort of started drifting away, the one of the guys, Freaky, he was one of the original shoutcasters himself from back in the audio days. He had started the Independent Broadcast Network many, many years ago, and he wanted to start it back up. And so he called on me to be the program director, and I took that job. And at one point we had about 20 casters on staff, just
Oh,
doing
wow.
different games. I mean, that was the thing that we did. Most casting groups tend to focus on one game,
Yep.
but what we were trying to do is, oh, some guys need a StarCraft caster. Oh, I know a dude, and then just kind of hook people up with gigs like that. And we sent people all over the world. We've sent people to Korea, to Germany, France. I got to go to Las Vegas. All sorts of travel and some pretty good paid gigs out of it as well. So a lot of people have benefited from it, and I'm very proud of what we're able to do with that. We haven't been as much these days. I keep in contact with a lot of those casters because everybody's kind of waiting on that next big game, I think,
Yep.
whether it comes or not. And so there are a lot of people kind of on standby, and people coming in that are interested in casting things. So we're going to be doing more of that, and also kind of pivoting more into doing some more general streaming stuff, because there's been people asking about that. Just go in there and stream some games and do the usual Twitch streamer type of thing.
Yep.
And I'm down to do that. Um, it's the like Morgan Freeman on Family Guy, and ever since I was a young boy, people have said that they enjoyed my voice, So like when I go on the hockey team speak, people are like, "Can you just read to us? I mean, just read a story or something." So maybe I'll just get on there and read to people on Twitch or something. I don't know, but we do have plans to kind of expand our broadcasting on IBN. But through all that, and just through meeting people in the industry, I've been able to do a whole lot of different games and work with a great bunch of people all over the world, and it's been one of the coolest things I've ever done. I never expected to be doing it, but and hockey in particular has been very special with that for me, because I'm a hockey fan. I actually played the game. Uh, and I've always wanted to. One thing I didn't get to do with radio was sportscasting, and so now it's kind of living the dream to do
Yep.
that. I mean, I've done stuff where thousands of people were watching, and then I do the hockey streams where I'm thrilled if I get 10, but it's still just as gratifying, man, because it's something that I enjoy greatly.
Well, don't think you go unappreciated. I mean, you're one of the best casters that I've heard in any esport, and you've got a fantastic voice for it. You've got a great knack for it, so it's
Oh well, thank you.
awesome, and I think we're super lucky to have you. So, but all right, so that's awesome. Given that, What game or what esport do you think is your favorite to cast? You don't have to
Ooh.
say hockey just to appease me or appease the community.
Oh, well, I did give a reason just now that hockey is definitely among those because it's one thing that where people can't say, well, they can say whatever they want and they're going to, but so fuck them. But it, in a lot of these games, when I'll get like called upon, one reason I did, it was the biggest World of Tanks tournament in North America at the time was because nobody else really seemed enthused by it. And I'm like, that's a fun game. I'll do it. And so you just kind of get involved in casting things, but then you get the people like, does this guy know anything about this game? Has he ever even played this game? What's his ELO? Why am I listening to some guy with a shitty ELO? And with hockey, at least I have some knowledge of the sport, so I can talk about the meta without. But I
Without
really
drawing
loved
criticism, yeah.
Tribes of Sin because it's a very fast-paced game. There's so much happening, and there's always these battles for the flag and for positioning. They're just so hype, and it's hard not to get excited when you see how well these guys play, as opposed to what you're going to see people just kind of goofing around in pubs. And so that one was I guess I would have to say Tribes and Tribes like games because that's what actually got me over the threshold of saying I enjoy this and saying I'd like to actually try to do this myself.
So it sounds like Tribes still holds a pretty special place in your heart. I'm assuming really is like the first game you really got into as a shoutcaster. That really does make sense. So okay. So was there ever a role model that you looked up to as a caster? Somebody you
Oh,
tried to
oh,
model your style after, maybe?
there are so many, and it's not just really. I think the thing about being a caster is that it's important to try to find your own voice. Not really by that. I try to consciously get things from. For hockey, I would say it's guys like your Pat Foley and your Mike Lang and people like that that have their own sort of Doc Emmerich. There's obviously things that you can take from their style. I would say in eSports, it would probably be guys from the old the TSN, which was the Tribe Shoutcast Network, and then it was the Team Sportcast Network. They were the original. DJ Wheat and all those guys were part of that, and so I would say guys like Warwitch and Boomerman, and I actually got to cast with Boomerman back in the day at Tribes Cast, and Warwitch was a guy who uh, a lot of people who watch Twitch are probably aware of Warwitch now. He's kind of reinvented himself as a variety streamer and done fantastically well. I'm really proud of what he's been able to accomplish in just a short time getting back in the saddle. But he casted one of our games back in '01 or '02 for Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and he's somebody that I count as a friend in the business, and he doesn't do as much esports type of stuff now, but he's really gained a following, and so I see that, and then talking about doing more variety streaming, that would be a guy that's definitely set the bar pretty high for something like that.
Okay, so is there a shoutcaster at all in any esport? It doesn't have to be Tribes or Counter Strike or anything specific. It could be anyone across anything. Any shoutcaster who you've always dreamt of being able to work with.
Well, I've gotten to work with quite a few of those guys, and Warwick is about the only one we haven't. We keep talking about doing it. We're going to get around to it one of these days, but we just haven't. But I've worked with some of the best in the business, Golden Boy, guys like that. I mean, I'm one of those people that people who watch esports may not know who I am, but people who are actually involved in esports, a lot of them still know me even after all these years, and so I'm hoping to get some of them out to do some casting on some of the new titles that are coming up, hopefully including our own.
Yeah, hashtag rekt, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about that some. Yeah.
Yep, we'll get into it. Yep. All right. So last thing about sort of your personal life and you outside the game, the winters that we don't get to experience. How did you get into the sport of hockey? I know you mentioned you played it a little bit growing up.
Uh, well, that was the problem. I didn't play growing up because I lived in Texas, and I moved to Chicago and lived there for a while. And uh, waiting for the Bulls games, you would have to see the third period of a Blackhawk game, and it was usually one of those nights where it'd be a 4-3 game, a 3-2 game, and there was a guy named Ed Belfour that would do everything in his power to keep that puck out of the net for that last 20 minutes, and just some of the things that he did were just amazing to me, and I became a hockey fan and a Blackhawk fan, and people can say, bandwagon now because the Blackhawks are good, but let me tell you, they used to suck for many
Yeah.
years, dude. And those teams at that time were very good, but they were also going up against uh, Lemieux and Yager in their prime, and
Oh,
so
and the
so it
Red
was.
Wings and the Avs of their prime
Oh
too, and
yes, yeah, the Russian Five and all that. It was a spectacular time to really get into hockey. So yeah, around the time that the NHL games on the Sega Genesis, where you knock them down, blood starts coming out of their head and stuff like that. Uh, but and the problem was is that and when we moved back to Texas, there was sort of a hockey renaissance going on in Texas. The Stars came here, and I uh, I found out at a late age that I was actually pretty good at the game. I don't know if I would have won a Stanley Cup, but I feel like I could have maybe got a scholarship somewhere doing it. But I just had of all the sports that I've played personally, and I've played a lot of them, I mean, hockey just felt very natural. The movements of goal felt very just like intuitive, second nature, and guys that we'd play with. We drew in all the Canadians because they would wherever there's hockey, any kind of hockey, they're going to find it,
yep.
and the a lot of the times they were amazed that myself and a lot of the other guys that were playing too, really didn't have any experience playing hockey because we put a lot into it. I went to a lot of roller hockey, a lot of tournaments in roller hockey all over Texas and the surrounding areas. Played against a few semi-pro teams and high-level players, and faced some tough shots, and just really got a real love for the sport, and it never goes away. And, I mean, there's no other sport like hockey. I mean, there's just something about it, man. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah. I wish I had gotten the chance to play it growing up as well. It's something that I didn't really get into until man, probably about 16 or 17. So I sort of really missed my chance. And at some point I want to go back. But I mean, you talking about playing goalie there. I mean, I have a profound amount of respect for goaltenders because I think playing goalie in hockey is probably one of the hardest positions in all of sports to play. And to be able to do that with any sort of skill is incredibly impressive. So one day
Yeah.
maybe I'll get to see you play. Maybe I'll take some shots on you and see how well I hold up.
It's funny. We've been talking about getting back into it. Some of the guys that used to play on my teams. So who knows? Maybe we will. Be
Did
good
you play
exercise at the least.
did you play goalie in HQM or were you a skater?
Uh, when I played, we didn't have goalies back then.
It's all skaters.
Yeah, man. The meta had not progressed to having goaltenders at that time, really. And then, after people found that, well, that was back when the game was kind of like watching little kids play soccer.
Yeah.
The ball rolls to one side and the whole team just kind of follows it around. That's kind of what hockey was like back then. So
Okay, so now that we're getting into hockey, I want to actually take a step back from what positions you played and ask how and when did you discover HQM?
Oh, hockey question mark the game. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Well, I was a fan of Cryptic C's work, and he had some. His games are very physics based, and he had a game called A New Zero. I think was probably the first one that I saw. I think that was the first one Dick Van Dyke saw as well. But it was kind of like cramming Battlefield into something that would fit on a floppy disk. It was a technical achievement, I thought. And then looking at his website, he has all his games up on there, and I found hockey, of course, being a hockey fan, and I played it, struggled around with it. It was hilarious. Brought it to our friends in the team speak, and we all just laughed and had a blast playing it. And next thing you know, we're doing streams of it, and those streams led to what became Friday Night Hockey, which eventually led to things like the HQML, and then later on we had the North American leagues.
So I know you're actually designated as the community manager of HQM and now of also, I think, Sub Rosa and Golf for Work groups as well, right?
Not Sub Rosa, or not anything we've talked about, no, but we have talked about Golf for Work groups, and yeah, he's Cryptic's kind of designated me as the CM because I've been
The guy.
sort of a liaison between for so long. Really, I would consider you more of a community manager than myself, man, because you've held this shit together somehow, and sometimes I don't know how you do it, but I couldn't have done what you've done at the level that you've done it, I don't think. But yeah, uh, as far as wearing the hat of doing it, yeah, uh, and I'm excited to see where Golf for Work groups leads. I always liked it when it was golf question mark. And I think compared to some of the other games on the market that are golf like games, I think it has, again, those Cryptic Sea physics, I think it has a lot of potential to be something that meets a pretty big audience.
Well, don't understate your importance either. I mean, you're a big part of helping build the community up from the beginning before I even got here. So, without a lot of the work that you contributed, things like the HQML may never have succeeded. People like Delphin, who wound up bringing me in, may never have even found the game if the game wasn't sort of progressing already on its own through guys like you and DVD. So, don't understate your importance by any means. So, I don't want to gloss over that. But
Well, thank
you
you.
sort of spoke about your relationship with Cryptic. Could you describe a little more what that's like and how you sort of first met him and how you first sort of, got to speak with him and how he came to an appreciation for what you were able to do?
Oh, I think a lot of that comes from Friday Night Hockey. I mean, it was really the first time that the game had been streamed on any sort of regular basis, and he was very supportive of it. He's always been really cool. He'd show up in the chats. He still does. He was there this past week on Friday Night Hockey, and uh, we got to talking a little bit more about the game as it grew, and just like one day I asked him, "Hey, is there any way we could put like a spectator mode with like cameras and different camera angles and stuff in this? How hard would it be to do?" And he did it in an afternoon. It was one of the last
Yeah.
updates for 55 that we got. He's like, what kind of cameras do you want? And then it was just this whole suite of cameras with fixed and movable cameras, and it was just a pretty cool thing. We've kept in touch a lot ever since, and again, getting into game development at Hell Legit Games, he's been a invaluable dude to talk to in that process because he is, I mean, he's a guy that works on games for a long time, and I know this is we're gonna get into some of this because I gotta do some real talk to the community on some of this shit before this is all said and done. But I mean, it's an iterative process that he uses, and all of his
Yep.
games sort of populate each other. I mean, the code that goes into one will be part of the code for another, but it also means that that process takes longer because you're not just churning them out one after the other. So a lot of these games are a work in progress for for like 10 years or more. And hockey is one of those, golf is one of those, Sub Rosa. I mean, all these games that have been it's one dude, sometimes two, that's doing all this. And when you're talking about building your own engine from scratch, when you're talking
It's a
about
lot of work.
all the stuff that goes into this, I mean,
Oh yeah.
he's kind of it's genius level work. I've always thought so, even before I actually got a chance to chop it up with the dudes. So it's been very cool to see the progress on all this stuff. Although, yeah, I know, so the community gets frustrated sometimes that overnight we're not just popping out new versions of these games. But some of it's going to take some time, and I think as people try to make their own versions, I know Matt's working on one right now, and if anybody knows the challenge of it and understands what they're getting into, I think it's Matt. He's a pretty level-headed dude. Uh, but we've seen 3 or 4 attempts, I guess, so far now at we'll just make our own hockey with blackjack and hookers, right?
Yeah, they've all failed. Yep.
Yeah, it's tough, man. You can't just say, okay, you know, make some shitty models, put them on the ice, and let them go. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and then so much of it is found things from these other games that enters into the physics and the way things work
Yep.
of a game like Hockey Question Marks. So I don't know. I uh, I appreciate what the dude does, and he's been talking up hockey a lot more lately, and we may be hearing from uh, other people who are involved in the development of hockey. I've got to follow up on that. So without going into too much of it, but I think that the future of hockey is a little bit more brighter than sometimes the community is giving it credit for being.
Yeah, definitely. There's more there than I think people realize. So, all right. So, what is it about the game itself that really drew you in and kept you here? I know you mentioned you were a big fan of his games, but what was it about Hockey Question Mark specifically that made you say, "Wow, I really want to stick around with this game"?
Well, for one, it's hockey, and we talked about
Yep,
hockey as a
for
sport. I
sure.
mean, and there's really no other game like it out there. I mean, EA Sports has kind of given up on the computer as far as making NHL versions for it, and but I think what keeps me going a lot is the community and seeing it grow in North America. So I remember when there weren't many people playing here. I mean, when I started getting into this stuff, the Russians were the undisputed powerhouse of Hockey Question Mark. They're about the only ones left playing it, man. In Russia and Eastern Europe, and places like that. And so just watching not only the growth of the community, but the evolution of the gameplay in the community. And I talk about this every week on the cast, so it's trotting familiar ground here for anybody that watches this stuff. But I mean it's just been really cool to see. I remember we used to say, man, maybe one day there'll be a North American team that might come close to beating the Russians. And now I think we're on pretty equal competitive footing with any of the regions of the world that play the game still, and that's saying a lot because those guys are phenomenally good.
Yeah, we played him. I think you casted it too, the NA versus Russia series that was
Uh huh.
going on almost 2 years ago now, which I think Dalfan brought up in his interview, which is the first one we did, which the team was Matt, myself on offense, Taser on defense, and Dalfan in net. And we played up against the Russian All-Star team in a best of three on their servers in Europe. And we lost the series, unfortunately, but we lost 2-1. And that was the first time that anybody from the West had beaten a Russian team at all on a Russian server. So I think, and that was 2 years ago, and we've only been getting better since then. So I think you bring up a good point. I think we're at least on equal footing now, and it's a shame we'll never get to see really how both, not continents really, but both communities, European and North American, how close they are in skill or in talent or in ability as an entire team, not just on an individual level, because we can't really ever see what a game would be like without the influence of ping. And unfortunately, as you know, ping is a huge problem with HQM.
Yeah, ping and latency has really slowed us down. But I was really proud to do that World Cup where we had, and of course, Russia did win that World Cup too.
We
They
have to
are
do
still
another
being,
one.
yeah.
Yeah,
But that was a big issue, is the latency issues, the ping issues, and the only real solution that anybody's come up with so far is make the ping equally shitty for everybody that's
yep.
playing, no matter where they're at. And I think Migo Mipo did the research and decided that Cape Town, South Africa, would be the best location for a server that would be equally crappy for everybody. And so, yeah, you're playing on really slushy ice, but at least everybody has that equal handicap on the ice. So who knows? I, there's always talk of doing something like that sometime in the future, and I would like to see the international game be explored a little more in spite of those issues, because those have led to some great moments. We didn't really know much about Russia. They kind of kept to themselves, and those games that you're talking about, games like that really opened up the game, and I think it made the North American players better to play against that level of
Definitely.
and I was the first. I'm very proud of this. I was the first American guy that they let come over and cast a game for the Russian leagues, and I was thrilled to do that. And that's definitely one of the highlights of my hockey career. And they're all real cool. I had to go onto a VK, the Russian Facebook, to translate what they were saying. It's like, this is better than the guys that do the KHL casts. So, no, that's really cool.
That's some high
So
praise.
yeah, so shout out to all those guys, Kukler and all the Eartha, all the Russian community, the Eastern European guys, the folks over in the UK. UK's got a strong bunch of players in England and Scotland, and just all over the world, in places that you would least expect. Yeah, and places that you would expect that are good at hockey just in general. That they have some uh, talented players, and yeah, if there was some way we could fix it up to where we could explore that a little bit more, because I really think that lifted the game up across the world, and yeah, it definitely improved the level of play over here, and I think that was a big factor in the leagues becoming as strong as they are now.
So talking about the leagues, how come you don't play the game anymore?
Oh, well, see, this is what happens with me in casting. I end up doing so much casting that I fall behind in actual play skill, and I've found that one of the things that's helped me in casting is that I'm one of those kind of mutant people that would a lot of times rather cast the games than play them. So, as a player, I'm completely terrible, and of course, I don't even know if I could be a backup on a JSL team, at this, or reserve league JSL team, their B
There will
team or
always be
whatever.
a place for you, Winters, if you want it.
Oh, but yeah, it's just but I've watched so much of it, but I know what to do, but then getting on the ice and just doing what these guys do is way beyond my pay grade at this point. I always point that out on the cast. I mean, this game looks easy because we're up here in the booth watching it. I can assure you that it is not easy at all.
Definitely much more challenging than it looks. So continuing on with talking about the leagues, you and Killinger, for a lot of people who are newer or don't really know Killinger, you two were the dynamic duo of HQM casting. You were the guys. What happened there? Why did Killinger split off and sort of leave you here by yourself?
I'm gonna give you a real answer, man, because people were being a bunch of fucking dicks.
You want
That's
to
why.
elaborate on that? I'm trying to squeeze it out of here. I want you to say it.
Well, I wish I could, because it was just another one of those drama things, and there's always these little drama that and like on this one, if I say something like, well, I knew there was some drama last week, you could watch this weeks from now, months from now, years from now, and just go, oh, well, I wonder which thing it was.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I can't even remember what it was, but I think it was it was at one point, I think, when the backlash against Cryptic C was he
Probably around the
Killinger's
time
not
of
a guy
50,
who
58, 59, right? When that came out.
probably around about. I'm not sure exactly what the catalyst was, but uh, or else I would go into more detail about that. But I remember he just felt like the maturity level. I mean, I mean, we all like to fuck around and have fun, but these are people that, you should know better. They should know better. And so he really was. It was. He's a guy who doesn't uh, suffer fools gladly, as the old folks would say. I guess. So, I mean, he some of it just felt hard for him to keep putting in that volunteer time for if that was the level of appreciation that uh, and I'm putting words in his mouth here probably somewhat, but I know him fairly well. But uh, I think that had a lot to do with it, but also time constraints as well. I mean, he's got a live-in girlfriend and two dogs now, I think. So that's a full-time occupation right there. But yeah, I think he just there was just kind of some fatigue from some of the. You have to have some hard bark on you, as they say sometimes in
Thick
this league.
skin, yeah.
I don't want to. As much as good things I say about the community, I never want to cast it in a bad light because, in spite of whatever drama is going on at the time, things just continue on. And but sometimes, man, I mean, hell, even you, Doll, I know there's at least a time or two when you were like, okay, I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
Oh yeah.
But then you get pulled right back in, don't you? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And believe me, I've been there too. And there's been a few times where either it's been like, okay, I think I'm done, or you know, or maybe this community isn't going to last much longer at this rate, but somehow it does, and so I celebrate that. But yeah, I think it there was just a particularly dark time, one of those drama times that probably discouraged him enough to the point where he finally said something and said, "Okay, I'll leave it to you."
Well, it's also the build up, right? I mean, that was the famous legendary dial retirement that gets brought up more frequently than I wish it did. Um, really, it came for me as sort of an amalgamation of like just a bunch of smaller things that just like nothing backbreaking, but just a bunch of really annoying things that happened over and over and over again. And eventually it builds up into the point where you're just like, why am I putting up with this? And you just throw it to the side and you walk away for a while. And some people can stay away, and some people like me have invested way too much into it and just feel the burning desire to come back. And unfortunately, here we are.
Yeah,
So,
and so I think that's very well said, and I think that's a lot of what happened with Killinger. But I'm hoping that he comes back and does some guest casting here on some of these Friday Night Hockeys that we've got coming up in the future.
well, he's
Um,
definitely missed. So you can be sure to pass that on to him by those that were here when he cast it originally. So
I definitely will, because I know out of those hundreds of hours, he was involved in quite a
a
few of
lot of
them.
them. Yep.
And mostly that was I pressed him into service. Hey man, you know, need an extra caster. Do you want to do it? And at one point he said, "Well, I'm not really a caster." And I'm like, "Dude, look around. You've been doing this for like 2 years now. I got news for you. You're a
Yeah.
caster."
The
You
unfortunate
are what you
reality.
do repeatedly. So
Yep.
yeah, he was and he was a good comedic foil. We could bounce things off of each other and stuff. So yeah,
You guys
I'm
worked
hoping
very well
to.
together.
Yeah, it was always fun, and so yeah, I'm hoping to see if we'll get him in to do some guest spots.
So, what is one of the most memorable games or series that you've ever cast in HQM?
Oh my Oh wow, there's so many, man.
You don't have to pick your favorite, just one of the ones that you've really enjoyed.
Well, I guess one of the more memorable ones, of course, would be the so-called Jesus goal, the USA versus Canada game, where
Round
the
one.
huh?
Round one, the first time we played them in the series, I think it was, right?
Yes, it was, and that was the one where there was a shot that did the cryptic sea physics where the puck disappeared up above the rink, and we always knew this was going to happen one of these days. But who would have thought it would be in a game winner to for the USA to beat Canada? It flew to one side of the rink and then landed back in the other goal.
Yeah.
So just a one in a million shot. There's I think we've still got a clip of it on the IBN casting YouTube, and yeah, this is just an amazing moment to call. But yeah, also just Friday Night Hockey and the HQML in general, because as much as I love the LHL, and I've been there for so many great moments in LHL, it's hard to nail down one in LHL because I mean, it's such a high level of play, and but just the fun that people had, and even the scrubbiest of scrubs on Friday Night Hockey would have their moments in which to shine. Their crazy goal that wins the game, or their last stand to preserve a lead, and but also yeah, the international games and some of the show matches and some of the things that we've gotten to be involved with over the years. I mean, there's a lot of big events that have happened. I mean, throughout the history of hockey. I mean, and hockey question mark. We've been. I've gotten to witness a lot of history, and I do not take that for granted. So yeah, you could write a book on some of this stuff, and I'm sure with all the stats that you guys keep there, you could probably write a book right now. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. I could recite a book from memory for you
yeah, I was
with this
laughing that you
rain.
even had stats for me for the casters. Okay, you've done this many games, this many hundreds of hours. It's like, oh
I'm
man,
a
yeah,
numbers guy, man.
yeah.
That
I
stuff
mean,
sticks with me.
I hope my plus minus is good on those. Yeah.
All right, so we spoke about more memorable games. What is your favorite, or sorry, who is your favorite player to watch?
Oh, it's got to be Dial. Oh, there's. Well, you're definitely one of them, man. Because there's been plenty of times when you've been called upon to make that clutch goal, and you have done so. But yeah, Matt Kukler, uh, yeah, Dalfan. I mean, a lot of these guys have. I hate to start naming people because then later I'll be like, oh man, I forgot about that guy. But for me, especially lately, I want to give the goalies a shout out because, like you were talking about, goalie is a difficult position to play, and
Very
with the
unforgiving.
mechanics of hockey question mark, it is exponentially more difficult. And what we're seeing these guys do is just nothing short of remarkable. I mean, just every week we see these goals that, oh, that's going in. And somehow, you know, you have a PK Baching, a meat sale, just pull something out of nowhere and get that big save. So I think rather than name any individual players, I would have to say, just all in all, even though the goal shooters, the forwards, are of course amazing and have just gotten more amazing, just the rise of the goaltending position and defense, and especially these last 2 or 3 seasons, I've just really noticed that defense tightening up in the LHL, and just people playing a more team oriented D that is just really hard to. You have to think of a way to crack it open, and you have to kind of work your way through and counter attacks. Make sure your passes are on point. There's not. It's not like the good old days where you could just you got your one good guy and he starts at the back and he just kind of deeks and dangles and weaves his way through everybody and goes to the goal. You'll see that every once in a while, but you're not going to win a cup that way. It's a team-oriented philosophy, and I think a lot of that comes down to, yeah, goaltending and defense. So the unsung heroes of hockey question marks. So yeah, I'll answer that by shouting those guys out. I mean, I do my best to call the names out when I see things happen, but sometimes they get so tangled up in it that as a unit that it's hard to see who made that block, who got down there and got in the way of that. These little plays that they're not putting points on the board, but they're keeping points off the board, which is just as important, if not more important, especially in a long season like LHL plays.
So if you could change one thing about the game itself, what would that be?
Hmm. Well, I'm hoping that we can open up the lines of communication a little bit more and get uh, what make everybody a little bit more happy between the developers and the players. And part of that comes in getting useful feedback. I don't like it because it sucks. It's not useful feedback. It has no intrinsic value to somebody who actually is sitting here trying to make the game better. But if we can say, well, here's what we want, and I know you guys have compiled some pretty good lists in the past, and it's we may be getting into time to start digging up some of that. I know Legendary Trev, who has helped revive the Friday Night Hockey games in the 62 version, and want to thank him for doing that. He collected some very useful feedback that I'm passing along to Cryptic C on the 62 version, things they like about it, things that feel wise that could be changed. And I'm hoping that we can facilitate something, no matter which version it is, 55, 62, that we can get the game more like the players want it, and get the developers more involved in checking in with the players, because I can tell that I've defended the devs a lot, and I'm gonna, but I want to defend the community too, because for one thing, I understand why they're frustrated, and for another thing, I want them to have the game they want, and these are guys that have put hours and hours into the game, so those are the people who know best what is broken, or what could be improved upon. And so I hope that just the communication, I guess, and kind of brokering those deals. We live in the age of the art of the deal now, and so if I can help with that in any way and kind of grease the wheels and get things, make 62 a little bit more tournament ready, maybe see if there are things in 55 that can be changed from the developer end, because some of it is an evolutionary dead end on that version, but some of it is things that could be fixed maybe. And so, but first we've got to figure out where we're at on both sides, and so that's what I'm hoping. As far as changes made in the game, I'm hoping that we can start having a real dialogue about that and kind of get over some of this animosity that's built up in the past, and it's sort of built up a culture of animosity that doesn't necessarily have to be there, I don't think.
For sure, I agree, and hopefully, with within the near future, we'll be able to address that and sort of help facilitate, like you said, or move towards a more positive, stable relationship between developer side and community side. And I know you're going to be a huge part of that when it happens. So
I do my best, man, and that's part of why we've started doing Friday Night Hockey again. For one thing, I think it's important to have a fun night. As much as there's nothing like the intensity of LHL and all the stuff around it, just makes it a special thing. The drafts, the trades, the stat. I mean, it's such a, and talk about people who do volunteer community work. The guys who volunteer to be on the board, the guys who put together this stuff, the stats and everything. There's a lot of people who do a lot of work behind the scenes to make all this work, and it doesn't just come together by itself, and it's not easy work, and it's very thankless work a lot of the time. So um, I want to shout out to those guys too. But yeah, I think even with all that, you need a night where people can just kind of have fun and goof around and blow off steam. And it's like there's not any salt if somebody loses, because who cares? You know, it's a video game. It's fun, and that's I think that's what attracted me to hockey question mark as a game in the first place, and that's definitely the spirit we've tried to imbue into Friday Night Hockey. And by doing it with the 62A version, I'm hoping that, you know, I know not everybody likes it. I mean, not everybody's going to like it, but if you approach it kind of as its own thing, I think there's a lot of fun to be had with it. And it's cool that to see the support from Cryptic C. You know, I mean, he's always been a big fan of the Friday Night Hockey, which we appreciate a lot. And if we show that the community is interested, because I mean, you know, as much as I'd love to sit here and take credit for some of the things you're crediting me for, really it's just shine that is reflected onto me from off of the community itself. Because if people were not coming to play on Friday nights, then it wouldn't have, you know, gotten Cryptic C's attention. Like, hey, the people are still playing this old game I made years ago. You know, so there's maybe there's something to, you know, here I'll make some updates to it. You know, seeing that people love and support the game, I mean, that's what you really wish for as a developer. I know as a fledgling developer, I if we get a community that's even half as cool or half as big even as the hockey community, I will be thrilled to death. So I'm hoping for some mutual appreciation that's going on, kind of change the atmosphere a little bit. I can see some changes starting to happen, and I'm hoping it continues in that direction, man.
All right, so that covers it for questions I have about HQM. Is there anything else you want to mention or talk about or bring up involving the game or the community?
Just that I love and appreciate the guys and everything that they do, and just everybody that's involved is part of making it what it is. And I know that with Tribes, I always said, as long as people are supporting the game, I'll hang in there and support them through casting. And I did until it was gone. And I plan to do the same thing. I've made that same pledge to the hockey community. I want to thank them for helping me get this computer that I'm talking to you on. My computer died during last LHL season, which was kind of a bummer. But through some crowdfunding, I got a new system set up here, and so I'm able to cast again. And a lot of the folks that threw in on that were people from the community. So I want to thank everybody once again for that, and people who support me on Patreon and all that kind of stuff, because times are tough lately. They are, but you know, I this is important work to me. Is you know, yeah, it is volunteer work, but it has a great deal of importance to me, and it has a special place in my heart. So I just want to thank everybody that, especially anybody that's listened this far into this shit. I mean, you guys are the best. I love you so much.
So in closing, I'm gonna leave you with one final question. What is Hella Legit Games and what is hashtag rekt?
Hashtag rekt Dawn of Beginnings is a first-person arena shooter that we're working on. Killinger is one of the guys on the team, and Vormulak and some of the guys from our that I met from Tribes, actually, you know, a lot of them. And we a few years back decided to make a first-person shooter of our own, something that we would enjoy playing for ourselves. And we figured that it would be, you know, easy peasy, right? It's just Unreal Engine, right? You just turn it out, and we figured we'd be done in a few months. And we could have, but we wouldn't really have the game that we envisioned. And you know, you can do a lot with Unreal Engine, but it's very generic because it's meant to cover a whole lot of different games. So we've done a lot of rewriting of things to make it have its own feel and get rid of some of the clunkiness that people associate sometimes with UE4, and get some different art and stuff, waifus. You got to have waifus to make a good game now, and we have the best waifus. We truly do. They're tremendous. They're huge, and I think people will really enjoy that. And I'm writing a lot of the story for it, which is fun, and doing the sounds for it, and we're working on it quite a bit. And we've got a really good map maker now making levels, and I'm not sure when a release date is, but we are definitely in the testing stages right now of some of those maps to try to make them a little bit more uh, ready for the final build of the game. And we're going to be doing a lot this year that will be playable by the public, so people will be able to kind of follow along. I know you guys gave us some useful feedback before in the past. I remember we got some of the hockey guys in there, and you guys gave us
Yeah, that was a lot of
a
fun.
Google Doc with a whole bunch of stuff. It's like I don't usually play these games, but as a person who is just playing this for the first time, here is, and that's the kind of feedback we want, because we want a lot of the people that wouldn't normally play these sorts of games, because it's the movement is fantastic. I mean, you can get up a lot of speed, you can run on walls, you can fly through the air. It really, if you like things like Titanfall and stuff like that, you'll be really at home, even more so, I think, with the movement that the characters are able to make in this game. So we're very excited about the game itself, and we hope to have more to tell people about it very soon. You can go to hellolegitgames.com is the website, and of course Hello Legit Games on Twitter.
Well, there we go. That's about all I have for you. So, thank you, Winters. Thank you very much for coming on. And for anybody who wants to keep up with Winters and what he's up to, you can find him on Twitter at Winters with a one. For those who want to support him for what he's done or what he will do in the future, he has a Patreon set up at patreon.com/Winters with a one again. You can follow along with IBN Casting on Twitter and also on YouTube. And then, as Winters just brought up here, you can find Hello Legit Games on Twitter at Hello Legit Games and HelloLegitGames.com. So yeah, Winters, thank you very much for coming on and doing this episode with me. It was awesome to have you.
Thank you, Dial. This was a lot of fun, man. Well, like I said, when you asked me, I'm like, oh man, we could, I could sit around and bullshit about hockey for hours. We've
Oh
done
yeah.
it, so But looks like we've got just a little over an hour, so we're stopping at a good time here. But yeah, it's always a pleasure, man, and it's a real honor to still be part of the community and have people listening to the cast, watching the casts, and saying good things. I enjoy everything that has come from it, and I'm looking forward to what happens in the seasons to come. And I think there will be uh, quite a few seasons to come if things keep going like they're going, man. I'm very, I have high hopes for the future of hockey question mark. And that's not always true, but at this point, I have to say that I do.
That's awesome to hear. All right, thanks again, my friend, and we will see all of you on the next episode.
Yes, yes. Good night.